A Cat That Really Was Gone. A story by Big Grug. Chapter 4. Purple figures in sports bras and fatigues cheered around the table. Hands waved in the air, laughing and chanting, accompanying the two battling giants grunting. Their two hands were locked, pushing against the other with force that would crumble a car. On one side was Vix, a broad shiv that stood a bit taller than even most 7-foot Shavanti. She had a build of a true Amazon, muscular arms and legs that rippled as they moved. Her sweaty abs clenched against brute force in vain. Vix would be considered built in Shavanti standards, which was quite the statement given the average shiv resembled Athena. Her bicep shook, slowly giving into the force of nature she was unfortunate enough to be opposed against. Ada was captain and assistant to General Bazania. She did not take these matters lightly. The general had given her authority to manage the Capital Patrol Squad, one of Bazania's personal teams made when Ada first shipped to Earth. Tonight was different, however. Her superior had departed for the night, saying she would be back in the morning. She gave no orders or checklist for Ada to accomplish, just to keep the girls under control until she got back. Things were going swell until a squad had decided that instead of sleeping, they wanted to fraternize. Ada was quick to put a stop to it, citing the reasonings and duty of the Marines to adhere to military doctrine. Until Vix challenged her. Challenges was beneath her, and she had initially refused until Vix began calling her leadership and the general's judgment into question for ignoring a contest of strength. Ada knew she had to discipline this inferior as soon as possible, lest the idea infect the minds of the others. Calling Ada muscular would be calling a supernova kinda bright. Ada would be considered by most to be a giant. She stood at the border of 9 feet, well over any of the Marines in the room. Her arms were easily the size of Vix's thighs, and her legs comparable to tree trunks. Ada ate a strict diet, giving her a low enough body fat that you could see all of her obliques. Her legs were planted firmly to the ground, and her face was of total concentration. A scar from her training ran from her forehead to the edge of her lip, large and more vicious scars bordering her shoulders. Small cuts ran along her abs, a few burns dotted her legs and chest. Her hair was an oddity among the Shavanti. The right side had an undercut and fade, with her hair draping over the left side of her face that somewhat obscured the massive facial scar. She smirked as she watched Vix attempt to fight back from the ridiculous amount of pressure behind Ada's arm. Down it went, until Vix gave a final cry of desperation when Ada slammed her hand into the side of the table. "I've emerged victorious. Do not call me into question again. As per our agreement, you will quit these rambunctious activities and retire for the night cycle. Am I clear?" A few grumbled, but silenced themselves as the fair Captain Ada looked over them. She turned, heading to her private quarters in the barracks. Vix rubbed her sore arm and snickered. "Hard ass as always, Captain. Why don't you ever just try to relax? Join in on the fun." Ada stopped, giving Vix a backwards glance. "Such activities are unprofessional, ill-suiting of a servant of the Empress." Ada was about to continue, until Vix gave a snarky reply that made her stop in her tracks. "I think you just need a good dicking." The captain's eyes slammed open, and she performed a quick about-face before pressing her face down against the smaller Vix. The smaller shiv was unperturbed. "Care to repeat that, Corporal?" Vix smiled. "You heard me, ma'am. I'd offer to share Boris, but I don't really like sharing." Ada was about to tear Vix a new one, but the room erupted shortly after hearing her response. Ada momentarily forgot her age, confused by the reaction of the Marines. A few seconds passed until one Marine finally asked, "Don't tell me you managed to bang a human?" Vix didn't respond, only put her feet up on the table she'd been defeated on with a smug smile. Her lips curled onto her tusks as she held her head high in response. Vix gave a quick look over of the room, glad to see every Marine enraptured. She spoke. "Remember Dr. Christina's culture festivals?" A few murmurs of confirmation swang around the room. Well, the humans decided they wanted to see if the strength stuff was true. Apparently the males down here are supposed to be the big ones. She paused, looking at her fingers. Her smile hadn't faded. So, they bring out these stands. Decent-sized boulders were in front of each one, and I figured out pretty quickly what was going on. A couple male volunteers and I decided that I'd take up the mantle for us gals. But then he only let one of us compete. Try to make it a bit fair. Probably should have been Big Bertha over here, was right up her alley, but dear old Captain was maintaining her performance at the gym, which seems to be the case for every culture festival. So we went with the second best, which is little old me. Vix gave a knowing glance to the fuming giant. I blew through them all. I'm not even going half effort, but I was starting to feel worried because if I kept embarrassing them, they might not be interested in me. We didn't even go to the heavier sections of stones before the line was gone. I was happy because I won, but then I realized I probably ruined any chance I had with the boys there. The looks became confused as the Marine stared more intently. But then he came. I could tell something was up because all the guys suddenly got excited and started cheering. Boris! 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 So I turned to see the new challenger. Vix played with the tip of her tusk, using her long tongue as she recalled him. He was shirtless. A few of the girls gasped and smiled. And I know a physique when I see one. You gals might even learn a thing from him. His head reached about above my boobs, so I knew he was a big male. I almost grabbed him there and then, but then I remembered Dr. Christina said having a shirt off wasn't a big deal for human males. Not wanting to ruin Bozenia's project, I controlled myself. Ada thought of cutting the corporal off mid-story to maintain order, but thought twice when she saw how every Marine's eyes was on Vix. And we start the thing all over again. This time the males are riled up, drinks are everywhere, and Boris is actually keeping up with me. I thought I had him several times, but the guy just keeps going. She took a deep breath. Now we're at the last rock they'd set up. The thing is almost as big as Boris, and I almost smirked when I saw him grab it. I thought there was no way, but he looked at me, nodded, and his face turned beet red. I was going to stop him when the red blood of theirs leaked from his nose, but sure enough, the rock came up and slammed on a pedestal. The humans freaked, vodka going everywhere, a couple of drunks started singing. Vix giggled to herself. So, I grab it, and it does surprise me with its weight. Very hefty. I look up at Boris, gave him a little wink before I launched that sucker up on the pedestal. Boris stood still, his little mouth agape. I think his friends were too drunk to notice or even care anymore, but my little Boris was all eyes. A few Marines groaned just thinking about being in her shoes. So, I did it again, and again, and again. I stopped after a few more and turned back towards Boris. It was gone. I was pissed for a bit. I thought my damn female ego drove away any chances I had with him. I was looking all over for him until someone grabbed my shoulder. And who was it but Boris? Vix leaned back further, looking out again to ensure everyone was paying attention. And Boris has that vodka drink, and he's offering it to me. I grab it, start drinking, and next thing I know, I'm trashed in an alley a couple hours after the festival ended. I'm grabbing my head, and it's way too dark for my hungover ass to see anything. And then came Boris. Lights flashed in all the eyes of the spectators. I barely registered he was there until that ballsy male picks me up. A much more contained uproar started. A voice called from the viewers. No offense, Vix, but you're a big bitch. How did a male pick you up? Vix rubbed her chin in mock comprehension. Boris is a strong guy. Anyways, he picks me up and says he watched me stumble into an alley all by myself after having a little too much fun trying out local drinking games. Honestly, I'm barely even sentient at this point, so his words were kind of flowing through my ears. I gathered we were going to his house, though. Sure enough, I found myself in the morning in a furry blanket. A pause. Did you... No, my clothes were still on. I don't think I was even sober enough to try to make a move on him. So when I woke up smelling in Mel's bed, I was going to get what I wanted. I overheard fizzling and the smell of meat wafts from the cracked open door. I stand up and rip off my clothes, and I slam that door open. There's Boris, still not wearing a shirt. I didn't care about human behavior this time. I was about to grab him and pull him into bed until he started to speak. His back still facing me while he held one of those pans. So the mama bear is finally out of her cave, he said while he gave a chuckle. He puts the pan off the fire ass on the cabinet and turns it off. He starts to put the meat he made onto 2 plates, and I'm creeping up behind him naked until I get right up behind him and bend over his neck. Vic swore she saw the faces go green with envy as she continued. Boris realized I'm behind him, but doesn't turn. He starts rambling about how he actually used to hunt bears and that the blanket I used was from one of them. That's when I grab him and push him up to the wall. Boris can't see me, but I whisper in his ear and ask him what exactly a bear is. He's a bit put off, but he answers. He says it's a mean and fierce thing, covered in fur and can rip a person in 2. My heart starts racing, and I realize why he called me a mama bear. Such a tease. I finally flipped him around, and the look on his face was to die for. The solid and stern Boris became a youngling, babbling and stammering as he stared at my tits. His face grew even redder when he looked lower. A few of the Marines had almost passed out. I started licking his ear, and he gives out the cutest whimper I ever heard. I ask him how he usually hunts big mean mama bears. Vix bit her lip. Boris still can't talk, so I pick the cutie up and throw him right back in bed. I ask him not to tell me, but show me. Vix caught in remembrance, her eyes flicking around and her tongue twirling as she remembered every little naughty detail. Well? The jealous Marine put aside her pride, eager to hear of more juicy tidbits. Vix tapped the table with her fingers before giving a final statement. I would adore seeing all your faces when I told every little thing Boris showed me, especially his spear hunting technique. There's a reason I don't bunk here anymore. The Marines around the room let their jaws hang loose. But I don't want Boris to feel worried about it. He may be a strong human, but he's still my male. Protests and complaints rang out from the mini-crowd. I will say, however, that humans are without a doubt stamina hunters. A smile once again crept up on the countenance of Vix. She locked eyes with Captain Ada, who was trying her best to tune out the scandalous tale Vix was reciting. The tale is true, by the way. They never truly finish. She emphasized the last part of her statements towards the captain. They just keep going. Captain Ada snapped. That's it. I'll have no more of this. It's blasphemy. You have latrine duty for a month. Ada's breath heaved from her nose like an angry bull. Her muscles, capable of bending steel, tensed and pulsed with her temper. The Marines across the room went dead silent, not wanting to be the next target of Captain Ada. Vix, not knowing when to quit, kept going. My little tale of meeting Boris make you squeamish, Cap? I would have thought a virgin like you would have loved it. When I go home tonight, I can ask him if he would be comfortable showing you the ropes. Captain Ada was fuming. Wait, Captain's a virgin? The shock that one of the most badass, take-no-shits and by-the-books Marines was a virgin surprised the entire group. One of the Marines spoke up. I'm a virgin too, Captain. No shame in it. I think most of us here are. Not much we can do. We ain't royalty. I'm sure some of us are better off than others, but we can't just get a male like that. 8 of us to one of them. It's a hard fight to beat.